Yes.
Hey everyone, Ruby and Jen here. We were just checking in. We wanted to respond to an awesome letter that one of my dear and well-respected friends left on my personal page about Ruby's page and my attempts to elevate her to service animal status. One of the most powerful things I think that Ruby's page is going to do is it's going to, start conversations like this. My friend talked to somebody who knew more about service animals than she did. So she's interested in learning. And I understand that my opinion and my view that Ruby and other animals who do heavy lifting service tasks for um, the population should have a path to be able to get the access that those people deserve so they can live their best life and their healthiest life. I realize that is in the minority. And if we don't talk about, the things that my friend brought up, then we're like not talking about what the majority of people think. So I'm going to start off with an apology, Ruby.
Please excuse the crudity of this model. I didn't have time to build it to scale or to paint it.
Right. So like I just pulled these visuals like out of the midair. I didn't put a lot of time into this. I just wanted to make sure that I address this in a medium which I feel is talking about it, Ruby, versus just typing a bunch of stuff because there's so much to type and so many little bits to talk about.
Please
So
excuse
what
the
we're going
crudity.
to do is I'm going to read this awesome letter that my friend posted. And then what I'm going to do is Ruby and I are going to go through it and address some of the concerns and some of what was said. So be patient. It starts. Jen, while I certainly appreciate your concerns, I have to say that reading about your efforts to elevate Ruby to service animal status left me with many questions. I didn't feel a true comparison was being made. Admittedly, I have no service animal experience, so I reached out to a very good friend who does. My friend has been a professional animal trainer, including exotics, for years. Her work has included training service dogs for others, as well as her own personal service dogs over the years. Please understand that this doesn't mean I have any less respect for the wonderful mother you are to leave. But I do disagree with your aspirations to consider Ruby as a service animal. Here are my friend's comments. Anonymous. What separates a service animal from an emotional support animal is that the animal is specifically trained to perform tasks that mitigate a person's disabilities. The initial wording on the ADA did not specify the species of animal. However, in 2011, the wording was changed to specify that service animals could only be dogs and miniature horses. Among the reasons for the change in the law were issues with training and safety. While there is no doubt that an untrained animal can be remarkable, healing, and helpful, animals with rights to public access also need to be capable of the training required to be manageable and safe in public settings. Some species cannot easily be leashed, a legal requirement for service dogs and miniature horses, with only certain specific exceptions, at which time the animal must continue to be under absolute handler control. Another species cannot be housebroken or trained to the level required to be in a full range of public spaces. Can an animal of a given species be reasonably expected to remain calm and out of the way while their handler receives potentially painful medical treatment, for example? To claim service dogs cost $25,000 is something of a misrepresentation. People like to say that it costs anywhere from $5,000 to $25,000 to raise and train a service dog. But with owner-trained service dog, the cost is spread over a period of 18 months and includes all the normal costs of pet ownership, purchase price, veterinary care, health insurance, maintenance, training, etc. The cost to raise a different species to the level of training that would be acceptable for public access, as well as task training to mitigate disability, would be similar if not higher. Finding a trainer versed in public access training for reptiles like you, Ruby, for example, is not easy or cheap. And regardless of species, any service animal needs to have public solid access. Sorry, you need to change that so you can read along. Training. This is one area where I've seen things go south really quickly, and when people have tried to skimp on training. Particularly in medical and school environments, training needs to be rock solid. I'm not sure where the statistic that most autistic people may find that dogs are too much work comes from. This has not been my experience working with many people on the spectrum and helping them train their own dogs. Do smaller animals require less care? As someone who owns a variety of species and animals, I have not found it to be the case that well cared for animals of any species require substantially less care because they are smaller. Different species require different types of care. Dogs are easy as they live comfortably in the same environment with humans. Many reptiles have complex needs in terms of heat and humidity. In addition to dietary requirements, they're not always simple to fulfill. And again, training non-traditional species to the level that they are trustworthy for public access in all situations is much harder and more time and effort consuming than training a dog or a miniature horse. Having access to the emotional support that any pet gives is a huge plus for people who struggle in public settings. This is similar to the benefits incurred from therapy dogs and other animals. This alone, however, is not enough to constitute a service animal. A service animal is defined as a dog or a miniature horse because it was found that these animals who reliably and consistently can meet the criteria of being able to be task trained to mitigate a person's disabilities and also trained to behave appropriately in all public access settings. As an aside, if they wanted Ruby to be taken seriously as a service animal, they should at the very least hold her to the same standards as service dogs. She's pictured without any source of harness, usually not wearing one, collar or other restraint, and she's pictured with her feet on the table in a restaurant, and she's pictured on store shelves and sitting on merchandise, all things no service dog, aka animal, would be allowed to do. Okay, so let's break this down, shall we? So, friend, I don't expect that if you like my page or like Ruby's page, that you are advocating for her or campaigning for her to be considered service level, right? Animal. But what it does is it starts a conversation, right? It makes people start to think a little bit differently. It gives them access to the eyesight of what can happen for an autistic person whose animal does do service level work, but is considered an ESA, and how that infringes on their rights to live their best life and maintain their health and their safety. And basically, the most powerful thing I'm hoping for by starting this page is to start that conversation. So I am not offended if you don't agree with me. I expect most people who are not in the, let's say, 3.5% of the population who either have autism or are the parent of an autistic person. And that is like kind of high because let's look at statistics. I love statistics, right? So the World Health Organization suggests that 1% of the world's population are autistic. But let's just double that and say it's 2, because in many countries that is showing that it's not 1 in 100 kids under 8 who are autistic, it's 2 point whatever. Okay, so let's go with that. So let's say 2% of people are autistic, 2 people out of 100. Okay, now let's talk about parents, right? You'd think that would double the number to 4, right? But right now, science is suggesting 90% of autism can be genetically put to a parent or in the family, okay? And the other 10% are outliers. So we're talking, if you have one child with autism, you're going to likely have more than one, okay? You're gonna have siblings with autism. That happens often. So probably maybe 3%. And let's be kind and say 3.5%. Because if you're looking at you're maybe like at 1.75% of the population, not even 2 people. So let's say that brings us up to 3 people out of 100. The truth of the matter is that what matters to those 3 people, if the other 97 people, like it's a non-issue for them, making change is very hard. And I want to elevate a voice, right? Where I can be one of those people in a room of 100 people that 97 people, it doesn't even affect or is not at the level that we are living in. and that we see it. So I want to go over just a few of the things that this person was kind enough to write in her response, or his response, their response. She mentioned specifically trained. Okay, well, what Ruby provides for Leaf is not something that we are specifically trained to do. Humans are co-regulators. That is part of who we are. We do not become born in this world learning how to self-soothe ourselves. For example, you know, if your parent just let you cry and soothe yourself, yeah, when you were a baby, that's not a thing. It's not something that babies can do. And it's not something that autistic people, ADHD people can do on their own ever to the level that a neurotypical person can do. Sure, if they can co-regulate with someone, that gives them a lot more power over their emotional regulation, right? That gives them a lot more power over their sensory regulation, and to be able to regulate with someone else's nervous system in any situation, right? And in the beginning, when our children are small, it's mom or dad that they're co-regulating with and who are modeling calm so that they can hold themselves together. Okay. So I have a problem with the idea that in order for a service animal to mitigate a person's disability or the symptoms of their disability, that they need to be specifically trained. Perform tasks that mitigate a person's disability. You'll see Ruby like totally chill. Things that Ruby does, and we'll be talking about, I was thinking about this, 4 things. One, sensory regulation. Okay. She's able to give Leaf something outside of himself to focus on that's small. And because it's not a phone, a tablet, you'll notice a lot of our kids and teens and adults are like into that little bubble because it makes all of this craziness and it brings it to something manageable they can focus on so they don't get so overwhelmed. Their minds blow up, right? So Ruby provides that. Leaf can't go around Walmart with his face in his phone and get the food he needs, right? We're not talking about, you know, access to places and doing tasks that are just fun. They're just like, you want to eat, you have to shop, right, Rubes? Right. Second thing you do is you help him emotionally regulate. Your nervous system connects to him. And that means he's able to not lose it when he starts to feel overwhelmed, right? Because he can connect to your calmness. And that's super helpful for him. Without her, he would not be able to do that. That's not something that ADHD people, for example, can do. Out of the entire population of humans, ADHD people need co-regulation more than any. My son has ADHD and autism. Another statistic, 50%. They're thinking of kids with autism have ADHD. This is not something either thing that they grow out of. And that 82% have markers for ADHD. So like if you have some markers for ADHD, what works for kids with ADHD can help you, even if you're autistic and you don't have the DSM-5 to be able to have the dual diagnosis. Third thing she does is communication support. She's a communication support. When someone is overwhelmed and they are struggling with speaking about things they love, gives them the ability to break through that. So if somebody comes up to Leaf and it's like, oh my gosh, she's a bearded dragon, tell me about her. He may not be able to like make small talk in that moment, but he can talk about her, and then that kind of breaks the wave and he's able to talk about other things. And the final thing that Ruby does, which is for me as a parent, the most important thing, is she keeps them safe. We're going to be talking about how our kids, teens, adults lack safety awareness, and a lot of that has to do with being in overwhelm, sensory overwhelm, and being in the wrong nervous system, fight or flight. Our kids usually run, you know, as far as you can get from something that seems like it's attacking you, which that's what it feels like when you're in sensory overload, that the place that you're in is attacking you and you need to get out. Having Ruby with him, he may not have the ability in those. He does not. Okay. He does not have the ability in those moments to take care of himself and make sure he's safe. But if he's carrying Ruby, He's responsible for her life, and she's very little. And, if a car runs over him in a parking lot, he may survive that. He'll be hurt. It stinks, but she won't. So having somebody else to look out for and to keep safe, keeps him safe. When he's with Ruby, and say when he's living on his own right now, he just came home from college. So we're still doing a lot of modeling on how to spend your money and how to, which places you choose to go that support you and your own mental health and your sensory health. But at some point, he's going to be on his own going to Walmart. And if he has Ruby with him, I'm not worried about him I'm 0% worried about him getting hit by a car. I'm 0% worried about him tripping somewhere, falling down, and something terrible happening, because he's self-aware of her and her needs. And when you're a parent, or there's something that's dependent on you for safety and well-being, you kind of up your game, right? Like that becomes your focus, and you make sure that person's safe, or dragon, whichever works for you. That it needs to be manageable and safe in public settings. Okay, I'm not in a public setting right now. Ruby is so manageable. She does not need a bunch of training. She's not going to be on the ground. She doesn't need to know how to, and make sure that she doesn't bark or carry on with other dogs, or, like when she's out with my son, she's on my son, and he's in control of her. Totally manageable, totally safe. Dog bites you, you could lose a finger. She bites you, it's gonna sting, and you're gonna see little bits of skin here hanging off from her little teeth. But I mean, that's the worst that she can do to you if she was so inclined, which she is obviously not. Part of what makes her such a great service animal is her species, A. And the second thing that makes her a great service animal, and this is the same that goes with dogs, okay? Yes, I love dogs. Dogs are capable of so much. I think they're like angels with 4 paws. I agree with all that, but I don't think they're the only angels with 4 paws. The thing about dogs even is that there's only a small amount of dogs that actually make great service animals. You have a litter of puppies, and maybe 2 out of the litter go to the next stage. And maybe at the end, one is able to do the job. Maybe neither of them are, right? So it takes a certain kind of, in your head, like the ability to do this job. You have to kind of have those personality traits, right? Dragons are born with those personality traits. They don't have anybody in their environment that eats them. So fear is not something they know, right? And then if you have an animal with a personality like Ruby, for example, who is lazy, right? I'm using this because I don't have a beeper, who is like naturally lazy and happy just to watch the world go by, and has no more to give after what she went through. She's like, we can lean into that and make her an amazing service animal. Absolutely under control, calm, out of the way. So, okay, let's say Leaf's, something happens to Leaf. He passes out, he's got her. Is she going to be a problem and get in the way of medical people helping? No, absolutely not. She is small. They could put her aside and put her in a chair, and she would sit there for a ridiculous amount of time. And that's something like we work on with her all the time. For example, I went to go do laundry. We have to go to the laundromat. And I brought her along because it was sunny and I had a lot to do. Figured, when Leaf is out on his own, he's probably gonna have to go to the laundromat. So we try to think about, places that she may and he may go alone, just to see how she'd do. So every once in a while when she's around, we go and do laundry together. And I put her down and she sat for like half an hour when she started getting a little bit movie because her eye is hurt. So she scratches her eye. At that point, I was at almost having everything folded. So I was taking some warm clothes. I put her in the warm clothes, and she just like, that was great life. She was not out of control. People wouldn't even notice her. She's that quiet and definitely out of the way. Like, how more out of the way can you be than a bearded dragon who sits and doesn't make noises? Okay, so let's address the cost misleading. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you from my perspective. Okay, we're not talking just service animals in general. We're talking service animals for autistic individuals. Okay, this is really an interesting topic because I know a few people, families who went through the 25,000, right, Rooster? Yeah, she's like, you're turning my tail, kid. So I know some of these people, right? I'm gonna tell you about one family. One family is they $25,000 is pretty much what you're looking for in order to get a service animal, a service dog, because that's all there is. It's dog or nothing. So first of all, you have to have a kiddo who does well with animals, right? Who is attracted to dogs, who a dog might be their person. And if even if they're not, there's some skills that like the dogs we know can do. They can learn to smell seizures before they come. They can be attuned to their people as well as she can be, but not like as obviously attuned. When they're starting to have a hard time, they can be trained. Okay, this person's hitting themselves in the head. I'm sitting on the floor. I'm going to go in between. That's not something Ruby would do, but it's something that service dogs can do. So they do provide awesomeness. And this one family needed a service animal for a medical reason, right? So that was $25,000. They had to do years of raising money. Okay. And fundraisers, whatnot. So they finally get to the point years later where they get the money, not only for the service animal, you have to remember, okay, you're a family of an autistic person. And I'll tell you, as the mother of an autistic person, what you don't see, it's like pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, right? You see only the positive things we want you to see. You don't see what is really hard and how sometimes each day is just surviving that day with what you have going on versus adding a dog that needs to be continually trained and on your mind. Like you can't get a service dog and be like, okay, it's trained and you don't have to do any more work. That's not how it works. As a family, you have to do a lot of work. And even if you try to train your own service dog, that is a very different picture than a fit for a family who's training a service dog for someone who's not autistic, who's a neurotypical, who can take a lot of that onto themselves. Anyway, so they get this dog. They end up sending their kid and themselves, which costs a lot of money, to go to a camp where they get to know each other and they're trained how to interact with the dog. And this is training that continues on like as long as you have the dog. The stuff the family has to do, stuff the kid has to do. Well, it turns out this kid is not a dog person. Okay. And in order for a service dog to be effective, you have to have a relationship. It has to come from both sides, right? You have to have that connection. And this kid had no connection to the service dog. And therefore, over time, what that $25,000 service dog who can do this amazing medical thing, like amazing, is now basically like an emotional support dog for the family because it wasn't a good fit for their person, but it was the only game in town. And now, with everything that's going on, all of just surviving in a family like that, and some days are about survival, a lot of days are about celebration. It's a beautiful thing, but it's a very hard thing. You There are days I couldn't even imagine having like the ability to put that much effort into something other than my kid and like being dressed and going to work and like everything not falling to it. Right. So cost, level of training, okay, the care that we're talking about, which let me check to see is on the next one. Yeah, we'll talk about that later. So level of training, it's a lot for a family. It's a lot for an autistic person. And like I said, sometimes the autistic person, a dog isn't the right fit. And it does not end well. So I would encourage the person who does this, who does put service animals with autistic people. And if we're talking like medical service grade people, like service animals who have the little badge, who are approved federally, state, whatever, that they check in with them to see how they're doing, and to make sure that these families especially need support, like constantly, like they do. You're not gonna be able to give a family like that a service dog, and most of the time that person's gonna, that family member, that mom, that dad, even the person with autism, they're not going to be able to reach that bar all the time. So mitigate disability, we're going to talk about. I already talked about how Ruby mitigates disability, and the cost of public access training for reptiles. Like, how is that even a thing? I mean, honestly, you need to be safe and manageable. Yeah, we got that. Like we've accomplished that. Why would I have to pay money for that? It's just, it makes me feel that service animals have become like about money, right? Rubes is kind of like, it's crazy to me. So balance of care requirements versus benefit. So we talked a bit about that already. We're talking just in the home. So let's talk about balance of care requirements versus benefit. Yes, I admit she has special needs. She has to have a certain heat. She needs to be a certain heat level in order to digest her food. She has certain dietary requirements. Once you get her tank set up, though, they're pretty easy. I mean, getting that initial balance is rough, and learning about it is rough. But then after that, it doesn't take like a ton of care. Switch out lights when they need to go. Make sure they're getting their calcium deposits. Make sure you take them to the vet. Like Ruby goes to the vet versus a benefit. But when I'm talking about balance of care requirements versus benefit is, my son before Ruby, the rabbit was something he was thinking about taking to college with him, because the rabbit really for him is a good animal. It's an animal he can carry around, right? It's a small animal in a small cage, but it's big enough that you kind of have some heft. Like, I don't know if you can tell, Ruby's is kind of heavy here. She's pretty solid. So you can feel like for you hold her, you know it, you hold a hamster, not really so much. There's no pressure there. Yeah. So that would help him, but he decided against it because the balance of care that this rabbit would need, which would be, okay, clean the cage like more than once a week, especially if you're autistic and you have sensory issues. Having a rabbit cage in your room, you're probably cleaning it every day, right? Along with everything else you're trying to manage. And then, like, can you take the rabbit out in public where the rabbit's feeling good about things? Rabbits are prey animals, so they freak out quite easily. So is it beneficial to both? And if Leaf loves his rabbit, is he going to do that? So the balance of care requirements versus the benefit of him being able to hold his rabbit didn't equal, right? So for him taking the service dog out, okay, a balance of care. Well, we're gonna have to make sure we train that animal all the time. When they're out, dogs, I love dogs, but they usually want something from you. Service animals, when they're working, may be taught not to go for pets. But if you're autistic, like that's kind of partially what you would be drawn to the being able to anchor yourself into that nervous system. And if they poop like that is a no. Like, Leaf can open a can of wet cat food. His sense of smell and the dysfunction in that particular sense is ridiculously high level for him. So is a dog the right animal for him when he's by himself? No, absolutely not. So let's think of Ruby, balance of care requirements. Okay, well, get her cage set up. Yeah. Make sure she has everything she needs, feed her bugs. He doesn't seem to mind bugs. Make sure that she's getting sun. All of that stuff can be done in his home. But when she's out and about with him, what does she need from him? Nothing. She needs nothing from him. They just coexist. It's not like, he's going to need to worry about feeding her, giving her water, any of that stuff when they're out and about. So the balance of care, like when he's just trying to function like through his senses and not react emotionally, have emotional reactions to those crazy senses, she's not asking a lot of him at all. nothing. She's like the perfect service animal for someone like him. So I see here, let's see if I can move my thing. Natural temperament and amount of training. Okay. We're going to talk about why bearded dragons make great service animals and how natural temperament really, and also not on the ground, not off of somebody, how that helps someone, right? Difference between emotional support and sensory regulation support suggests that Ruby is providing emotional support. It's to misunderstand what she's doing to help her person. She doesn't really provide emotional support. Something is like, I had a hard day. I'm going to come home and hug the dog and it's going to make me feel better. But I was able to cope through the day. But, you know, it wasn't the best, perhaps, versus, you know, okay, I'm in sensory overload. I can't function. My body is constantly in the wrong nervous system, and that is completely a different experience than what you need emotional support animal for. And the last suggestion to present Ruby as a service animal. Okay, I understand the work and how important it is for service animals to be seen as service animals and not to present somebody else, something that isn't a service animal as a service animal. We don't use something for her because it just makes it harder for Leaf. And she's not a service animal. Okay, she's not, so she doesn't have to do that. If hey, she got to be service animal, and it's like, dude, you have to wear a harness, no problem, totally on board, right? But as of now, we don't want people to think that she's something she's not. We don't want to mislead people. We want to educate people. But I know that you can buy service animal things off of Amazon, Facebook, the internet. They can just slap on your pet and take them out to the store. And usually people won't question it, even if they're absolutely nuts. But I don't want to be a part of that. It would be easier, like if I did that, I guess, because then we wouldn't have to ask beforehand. We just had somebody, we called a local restaurant and said, hey, can I bring my ESA? And they said, well, what kind of animal is it? Now, see, that is not a question you ask if you don't allow ESAs. Because ESAs, you would be like, you would lead with, well, we don't allow any animals here. Right? Well, a bearded dragon. Oh, no, we don't allow any animals here. It's a safety issue, like, okay, well, we're being told no because you have like this concept of what a service animal, an ESA might look like. And oh, that's kind of freaky and it's different. So like, no, let's not do that. What if like one person here like is scared, then why allow, this autistic person the ability to function and enjoy your restaurant? So what we did is we chose to go somewhere else where she is welcome, and spend our money there. And that's something I'm working on with Leaf, but we do not ever say that Ruby is a service animal. Okay. And there's a reason for that. And yeah, I take pictures. I'm the one who, like, if nobody's around, we have a little bit of fun with her in the store because like that's his pal. Like he doesn't have like a ton of friends. Connecting socially can be is work for him and work for all people who are autistic. It's draining, so like, but it's not draining with her. We can have a little bit of fun and have a smile. And you know what? While we're having that smile, he's not focused on the sensory overload he's going through. So, you know what? When she gets service level animal, we are so behind anything that, you want to put on her. So again, this is how Ruby mitigates my son's disability. She is a sensory anchor and a tool to minimize and focus on something small in an overwhelming sensory environment, which means she keeps him out of his like highly in that fight or flight nervous system, right? So 2 nervous systems. One is rest and digest, right? And when you're in that nervous system, most of us are in that nervous system for most of the time. Most of us neurotypicals, rarely do we get into the other one, which is fight or flight. And rest and digest, when you're in that nervous system, your heart is being regulated, your lungs are being regulated, your digestive system's being regulated, your hormones are being regulated. But when you are in fight or flight, that um, nervous system, none of that's being regulated. And autistic people spend a ridiculous amount of time in that nervous system from when they are small all the way as they grow up. And it has a lot of health issues that we're going to talk about that follow that. Okay. Like that you would be amazed at. So, sensory tool is minimizing, focusing. So he's able to stay more in his, like less crazy fight or flight. I only think of it this way. Say Leaf goes into Walmart without Ruby. Leave us always carrying around a 20-pound weight, extra weight that we don't carry around. And when he was little, like that was sometimes really hard to even move, right? He got bigger, gets better at carrying that weight, better. Now he's an adult. And it's always going to be 20 pounds, and he's never going to get any bigger. He might get a little stronger, but carrying that 20 pounds he's going to have back problems when he's what, in his 30s and 40s, he's going to start feeling it. Without Ruby, he goes into Walmart. We're putting 40 pounds in that backpack that make him carry around the store. And then it was going to take 2 hours for him to get rid of that we very slowly take that weight back out. And that's just like a visual picture. So like if you were autistic and Ruby helped you do this, okay, that's what it kind of would be like for you. Now, let's say he has Ruby. He has his 20 pounds, right? So instead of 40 more pounds going into Walmart, let's cut that in half. Ruby cuts that in half. So you got 20 pounds, okay? And what's really cool about this is it takes you maybe 10, 15 minutes to get rid of that extra weight. So instead of going home and, dragging that extra weight around for an extra 2 hours, by the time you get home, you are back in your rest and digest nervous system. You're back at baseline. And that is like hugely beneficial when so many parts of your day is putting extra weight in your backpack. So the amount of weight and the ability to get out of her, right, out of that nervous system and into the right nervous system is life-changing. She assists with emotional regulation through that, borrowing her nervous system. That's co-regulation. We talked about that. A social support, a social communication support. Here's another example. I know this is long. I'm sorry. Here's another example. Recently, he graduated. Woohoo! Go Leaf. He's so smart. And so capable of so many things. Everybody who knows him, who really takes time to know him, can see that, but not too many people take the time to know him. So we went to this teacher-student event, senior event, and there were 2 autistic people at that event. Okay. One, he might have been, I don't know, 14, maybe 14, 15. He was a sibling of another student. And then there was Leaf. And here's the way they were the same. The way they were the same is neither of them had the ability in that very overwhelming environment to reach out and connect to others. So they're both walking in circles or just and stimming hard to get through it. The difference between the 14-year-old, the 15-year-old, and Leaf is the 15-year-old that I saw the time we were there had 2 interactions. One was from a teacher, a professor that spent an hour with Leaf every week and really sees like how cool he is. Really got to know him and his idea of what autism is and what autistic kids are capable of changed. So he went out of his way to actually spend time with this guy. And then me, okay, because I have my own autistic kiddo, so I went out of my way to talk to him. And you wouldn't think, for how hard he was stimming, that if you wouldn't think, wow, this kid is bright, talkative, just totally like everybody else, And he was verbal, very smart, astute in his observations, really cool kid. Now, the difference between him and my son is my son had Ruby with him. My son had maybe 30 interactions in that same time period, okay, because he had Ruby with him. And Ruby, like I said, breaks the barrier of starting. We can start talking about something that we're excited about, that we're passionate about, and then we can talk about other things. And the difference between those 2 experiences and the difference between if Ruby hadn't been there, my son would have had the same experience that the other kid had. So how is that an emotional support level? Like, hey, it was hard. Now you can hang out with Ruby when you get back versus, hey, you know what? You had 30 interactions with some really awesome people. Fun fact, Ruby is like a chick magnet. Like the right girls come up to him. I think you'll probably meet his wife through one of those interactions. Um, and also ensure safety. When Leaf is with Ruby, I worry 0% that he's going to get hit by a car. When he's not, it is a real fear um, that he's unsafe when he's out and about. Sensory regulation, I'm going to play this for you. What places like Walmart, um, schools, anything with a lot of people, a lot of sounds, a lot of smells that go in and out, what this can be like for how they process it. Okay. Because when we go to Walmart, yeah, we don't enjoy it, but it doesn't wreck us for the day. When we go to the mall, we might be fun because we're going for a pair of shoes, and we just love the mall. For them, it is not the same. So please take the time to watch this short film that was created by an autistic themselves.
Six, 7, 8, 9. Take my hand. I'm not naughty. I'm autistic. And I just get too much information.
I don't think most people understand. That's the reality of not just Walmart trips, but like anytime you go out and about. You notice the young man had a stuffy. Some people with autism or ADHD prefer to have emotional support items, I call them, and they help them. So that little dinosaur he had in his pocket was something he could touch and anchor. That was his little thing that he could focus on to try to handle not focusing on everything. And as you can see, for him, it didn't work out overall. And you'll notice the mom is calm, right? So she's kind of co-regulating with him, but she's separate from him the entire time he's on his own. And not for every autistic individual, but for people like my son, having Ruby with him is better than having a stuffy. Like it's a soul, it's another person in the foxhole with you because it feels like you're at war when you go out to Walmart or to other places. Is this gonna start over and change it? Emotional co-regulation, right? So we're talking about another way that Ruby helps him. We're not born knowing how to soothe ourselves. We need to learn the felt sense of being soothed from someone who can bear distress and stay regulated in their own nervous system, which Ruby can bear anything. Like nothing bothers her, and she's always regulated and calm. And it's known as co-regulation. ADHD individuals need to co-regulate with others or other beings more than any other population on the planet, even a bit more than autistic people who are a close second. Autistic nervous systems are much less stretchy, and it takes less time to get into the wrong nervous system, right? The fight or flight, which is when you're in there, you're only working with your that old man brain, your old brain, right? Where that's the only two things that exist, run or fight. And it takes a lot of time to get out of it. than we do. Borrowing someone else's regulated nervous system changes health outcomes, improves mental health, and lengthens lives. We're going to talk about that. Social communication support. Okay. I found this. I don't know if you've seen the documentary Spellers. I did. So, like, you take the time to see it. But this is for spellers. And it says, with a minimal speaker, non-speaker, or unreliable speaker, spelling to communicate, right? So that instead of like saying hi there or I am sad, it'd be I, A, M, S, A, D. Okay. That's how they can communicate. They're not only working incredibly hard to maintain the connection between mind and body, they are doing all of this while trying to maintain a regulated state. And now perhaps we can truly understand and appreciate why a trusted communication regulation partner is so necessary. In overwhelming environments and situations, all autistics are unreliable speakers. That doesn't mean they don't speak. Maybe they just don't shut up. You know, like they just talk randomly about stuff they love that you think, why is this person just telling me like a diatribe about something that has nothing to do with like the situation we're in? Or maybe like Leaf, they can't get started, right? So for Leaf in these situations, Ruby is his trusted communication regulation partner, right? She is the one who not only helps him maintain better so that he's able to communicate in overwhelming situations. She also starts a lot of conversations for him and a lot of connections for him that he normally wouldn't have. So personal safety, this is like my thing. Understand that this is a huge issue and people aren't talking about it. This was a study done in 2014. It was released in 2017. So we're talking like 6 years ago. You'll see they start in 1999 because there is no information before then that is reliable enough to do a study on. And that's crazy because like autistic individuals have been around for way before that, right? But they identified individuals with diagnosis of autism who died between those two times by screening causes of death in the multiple cause of death data files in the United States. Okay. So what did they find? Well, they found out that studying that the mean age at death for individuals with autism, and there is no a little bit autistic, there is no mild autism. Leaf is not a Sheldon, he is autistic. Every autistic person is autistic. You're not a little bit pregnant, you're either pregnant or you're not pregnant. They have different strengths, different weaknesses, they all present differently, but they all are autistic. Okay, so if you're thinking, well, Leaf doesn't count, like that makes me mad because trust me, he counts. You may not see a lot of the stuff that we keep private, but he counts. The mean age of death for individuals with autism is 36.2 years old. Can you imagine having a kid with autism and like the mean death for that child is 36 years old? Imagine if like that's your reality, right? Because that's our reality. There's been another study since then, which pushed it up to 50. Woohoo, you know, like great. And what is the causes, right, for the highest cause for death? And that is accidental or deaths, right? Injuries. And it breaks it down here to suffocation, drowning, injury, and mortality. Of course, that will take you out, followed by asphyxiation. And then another big one is vehicular, and it's not that they're driving all the time, but they get hit by cars constantly. Like whether you don't expect a 12-year-old to dart out in front of your car, right? Nobody's ready for that. An adult, like even less so, right? I don't expect that. But when they're in sensory overload and they're in fight or flight and they're not thinking with their thinking brain, that kind of stuff happens. There was a case like maybe a year or two ago when a special needs individual died crossing a street in our area. It happens a lot more than you would think. And it is one of my severe fears that he's going to get hurt someday out there. He's going to find himself in a situation that he can't, doesn't have the tools to cope with. He's going to go into overload and he's going to get hit. I can give you two examples that I have seen. One is when he was 16, I took him to an Interpol concert. Shout out Interpol. one of his favorite bands, and he was riding the rails. Like we got there really early so he could be in the front. And he loved it. It was definitely sensory overwhelmed, but sensory overwhelmed, like leaving like surrounded by bearded dragons, that'd be overwhelming, but like in a positive way, right? You're being overwhelmed by all this awesomeness, by your like love and passion, something you're really passionate about. And when we left, I knew he was going to be completely oblivious. It's kind of like going out with like your drunk friend who's 3 sheets to the wind, who can barely walk and like is doing dumb stuff. Like that is what sensory overload can look like in my son. Because I was with him and I was aware, I was able to pull him and stop him before he walked in front of a city bus. That would have been death. That would have been, would that have been in the two? Would he have been in the study? I'm not sure. He's 23 now, so he was, I don't know, maybe not. Maybe he would have just barely missed it, but that would have been done for. He would have been doomed. There's another time, when at school. So we're talking adult now, because once you get to where you're getting as an adult, there's not a whole lot of room to grow. It's not like you've got like this huge amount of growth that your nervous system can do and that your coping skills can do. Yeah, you can always, better yourself slowly, but it's not going to be like the massive amount of upswing that it was when you were younger. But so Bucknell decided a week before, they put out this thing that when their students went back to campus and they were going to have classes in person, that they had to wear an N95 mask. Now, a lot of you know like how horrendous that could be. In the beginning, when we started dealing with masks, which was very hard at the beginning of the pandemic, it was a smell, it was a feeling. My son would get like nauseous and throw up from having a mask on. He'd have a mask on less than a minute and he'd be wanting to like lose whatever lunch he had. It was uncomfortable. It was awful, but it was something that he had to get through. So over time, he learned to, deal with that better. And it got to the point where he could wear that mask like a boss. Like it didn't bother him at all. In fact, he was wearing it so much he felt more comfortable with the mask on than without it. But when these N95s, man, that's completely different, right? And that wasn't going to happen. There's no planet where an autistic person can wear that and not like go like crazy. But he had to do it. And we only had a week. We didn't even have time to kind of get him used to it. So we went to get his book. So we were in maybe like 35 minutes because we didn't have his book order like early because things were crazy. We actually had to go and do it in person. And he had to wear that mask. When he came out, he was so overloaded. And he was in such a rush to leave. I was running behind him. He got hit by a truck, but only the mirror, because I happened to be close enough to grab him and yank him with everything I freaking had. Like mothers can be so freaking strong. He's like bigger than me, but that kid went back, but not fast enough that his arm didn't get hit by a truck. This nice old man was driving really hard at 30 miles an hour. If I hadn't been able to catch him, would that have killed him? I don't know. Hopefully not. It definitely would have seriously injured him. And so much for that. He'd be in the hospital instead of going to school. And these are things that when you are the parent of an autistic individual, that's the reality. And if you are an autistic individual, that's the reality. Here's another really horrifying study from Sweden, very famous. And all they cared about was they wanted to find out why autistic people are dying so young. Okay. So you've got your general population. And again, mild, severe, whatever. But it does break it down, at least in kind of an interesting way, because you see like what his like leaf are more prone to. And you'll see that cancer, he's going to get cancer at a much higher rate. Circulatory disorders, right? From always being in the fight or flight nervous system and not having regulated body parts, that wrecks your heart, that wrecks your lungs, that wrecks your digestive system. And also look at that suicide one. When you are out in the world and you feel alone and you feel judged and you feel misunderstood and you feel things are never going to get better, and people go out of their way to make you feel less than human, that's what happens. I mean, yeah, we talk about the trans community, we talk about LGBTQ community. We don't talk about the other ones that are vying for first place in this particular part, which is autistic and ADHD kids and teens and adults. They are just like killing it, sadly. Like they're way above the rest of us. And you got to ask yourself, okay, why? Why is this? Well, okay, wrong nervous system can account for most of those health issues, right? Poor mental health accounts for the suicide rate, not being able to being like a square trying to fit into a circle hole. Everybody else just whoop goes right through, no problem. But you, no matter what you do, no matter how much you shave, who you are, no matter what you do, you're just never going to fit through that hole. And you're by yourself. One thing Ruby does for him, and he'll tell you, you're not alone. Ruby helps me because I'm not alone, right? To suggest that, you know, Roobster is an ESA and provides ESA level support is ridiculous in my mind. And to suggest that she is not calm and controllable and safe. I mean, really, she's been sitting here on my lap, so I'm talking. So why do beardies, okay, make great service animals for autistic people? And the only reason we know this is not like, I'm gonna get a bearded dragon for my autistic son. No, we actually rescued her. Somebody dumped her. I'll be sharing pictures through the site of what she looked like a couple days after we found her, which was like loads better than what she looked like when we found her. Why these animals actually are pretty awesome for autistic individuals. Number one, they have no natural predators, so they're curious, calm, and they do not react. So something is surprising, they're not like, kill it, you know, like, or run. They're just like, oh, that was unexpected. They're not dangerous. You know, a dog can bite off your finger, even if it's a little dog. Little dogs can be dangerous dogs. Ruby is just not capable of being dangerous. Like, if she bites you, it'll feel like you got a bunch of little, you know, needles for blood things, you know. You won't be bleeding a lot. It will sting a bit because it's your fingertip. That's like the worst you can do. And if you can find the right personality plus the awesomeness it is a bearded dragon, you end up with an animal that is very easy control. My son can be 15 feet away from Ruby and be completely in control of her. She moves at such a slow clip when she does decide to move, which isn't too often. And, you know, we leaned into the whole lazy out of attitude she has, and she's just great at that. They're trusting and capable of building relationships. Like, we did not initially teach Ruby to stay on leash constantly. That we noticed that was happening. And then we noticed how much calmer he was when she was doing that. So it wasn't, you know, that we thought, okay, we're going to take this animal, we're going to train her to do this. We're like, wow, look what she's doing without even trying. And look at how it's benefiting him. How can we like make this even better? Like, how can we expand on this for his mental health, for his sensory overloads, for his safety? Like, what can we do with this awesome thing to make it even more awesome? Smart and trainable. So she is smart. She's like a turtle. When she wants to go a direction, she'll keep on trying to go that direction, which we normally let her do when she's out and about. But she knows when she's out and about with Leaf, and he puts her on his lap, especially that's like where she's supposed to stay, because she pretty much does that. She'll do it for a long time. And you can see that time has gone up, 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 up. So where like you can sit and have a lunch and it's there for like 45 minutes and she's still sitting there. Rarely poos. Okay, we're going to talk about this because being, what's it called? Potty trained in order to access public is important. But she rarely does it, like every few days. She will twerk to give notice. They have like 20 seconds before she'll actually do it. And she only poops when her internal temperature is high enough. So she's not like going to poop in Walmart or at a restaurant because it's not warm and humid enough for her to think, I have to go to the restroom. And it's not actually poop, right? It's like these bug skeletons and this like caulky stuff in water. Like, and it doesn't smell or is not like as germy as what we make or what dogs make, what some other species make. You can stay on a person 100% of the time, right? So therefore, they're not disruptive, okay? And they don't need to be trained how to, make sure that they don't like bark and cause a ruckus when they meet somebody else on the ground, another animal. And they don't make demands of their owners other than to exist together and to go on their adventure together. So what could a path look like? So Ruby is not an ESA, but she can only be an ESA. What would I like to see happening? Ruby should have a path to become a service animal so that she can get the access that my son deserves her to get. Number one, get supporting mental health professionals and doctors documentation. So if we'd have that out to the zoo. The vet recommendation required yearly, bi-yearly vet visits. Got to make sure these guys aren't going to have pain reactions, right? And that they're healthy and that they continue to not be stressed and they're capable of doing their job. Do not require yearly reapplications. You know what? Why do I have to every year in order to get, medical access for my autistic son so that he can get the therapies he needs and get the extra stuff that helps him grow? Every year we have to reapply until they're 18. That's crazy. Not autistic anymore. Like, you were born autistic. You were always autistic. It really is you make things so much harder. The world makes things so much harder for parents and for autistic individuals to get the services that they need and that will help them. So once Ruby's okayed, as long as we follow, these other things, then she's good to go. Change expectations of training based on needs. Co-regulation isn't based on training. That's something that naturally happens between human and whatever animal it happens to be to fulfill their needs. And for my son, we're talking that would be a bearded dragon. And allow the families to take primary role. We've rocked it. When I went to take her to do laundry, I also put a sweater on. It was hot out, but I put a sweater on and I put her underneath my sweater because in the winter, that's how we, is able to bring her to some places for support. Nobody knows that she's there. And she just sleeps. She likes it. But she's a reptile and she probably needs reminders throughout the warm months that, hey, we do this too. I don't feel that Ruby needs a professional handler or trainer in order to allow her to do her job. And hey, you know what? You want to put her in a halter, a leash, no more picks and ollies on top of little dragon things from Ray of the Dragon thing, whatever. Hey, you know what? Cool. Not a problem. We'll happily follow those. That's not an issue. It's not, I'm not going to say, hey, no, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, but it's not just got to be what's good for the dogs and what's good for the miniature horses. It's got to be what's good for the humans that they help. And it's got to be more open because our kids and our adults, they see the world and they process the world in such an alien way to the way we process the world. What makes us think that what we feel is the only safe and manageable and, don't want them to take a poo. I mean, imagine all of these amazing things they can do, but if they take a shit in public, man, it's over. I think we really need to readjust what we value and what we don't. So thank you so much for the letter. I hope I addressed all of your concerns. I hope I answered my friend's questions to why I feel this is important. Ruby is just chilling. She enjoyed our time together. And I'm going to be posting this on YouTube under Autism Virtually thing. That is a group that I run along with a bunch of other amazing individuals. So feel free to join us there. We share Ruby's stuff there as well. She follows the group. So hopefully that answers questions and, and feel free to have your friend who obviously liked Ruby's page. Hopefully they're still there. Stick around and, let's have these conversations. Let's talk about the hard things, Thank you so much. All right. Ruby, you want to say bye-byes? Yeah, bye. She's like, I don't want no problems here. Bye.